At UMC, access to your healthcare is only a call away. Dial 74NURSE for free, instant medical advice from experienced and trusted UMC nurses, 24 hours a day. Learn more at umchealthsystem.com.
Welcome in, everyone, to RedRaiders.com. I'm Zach Long with Don Williams, and that means this show is Don versus Twitter, where every week AJ Don Williams, as he is known on the Twitter world, takes on your Twitter questions about Texas Tech football and does his best to drop his knowledge upon you. And Don, you've got a high task this week. These guys sent in a lot of good questions.
Yeah, in fact, Zach, we got a whole bunch of questions right before we're going on the air today, which is fine, which is good. I might tell folks, though, if you think of a Texas Tech football question at any point during the week, it just pops into your head, send it to us on Twitter and say, hey, take a crack at it on Don versus Twitter, and we'll get to it. Normally, we do this every Tuesday. It's a short week, though, with TCU coming up on Thursday, so it's a short week for the football team. It's a short game prep week for football covering media as well, so today we do it on Monday.
But we are not short of questions. Good subject matter here, Don. And I want you to take a guess here. I've got about 4 questions by my count on the same subject matter. Do you have any idea what they might be about?
Quarterback situation.
Oh, my goodness. That's why he is the legend, folks.
Is it quarterbacks?
It is definitely quarterbacks, and it's all centered on Michael Brewer. I'm going to read off these 4 questions and then let you have at them. First 2 of them are from Leroy Jenkins, and Leroy says, at AJ Don Williams, will Michael Brewer be cleared to play Thursday? And if so, do you see him getting in the game at all? And continuing down below, Kyle Hayes says, do you think that Baker Mayfield will continue to play even when Brewer is 100%?
Yeah, and also Fork Dork asked if Brewer was deemed 100% healthy right now, would he start on Thursday? Here's the thing about Michael Brewer, and Cliff Kingsbury had the most illuminating stuff to say on Michael Brewer during the Monday press conference, I think, that he's really said in a month. And I'll just throw it out there. I asked Cliff, I said, given the amount of time that Michael Brewer has missed, and he hasn't practiced for a month now, at such point as he is cleared, how much time is he going to need to get back into it? And Cliff said, and I'll just read his response, he said, I think quite a bit. We have that bye week coming up, which should help, but I would assume it's going to be an extended period of time before we feel like he'd be game ready. And he went on to say, it's not easy with the style of play that we have, up-tempo, and how much we put on our quarterback to just roll right in and pick it up. So I think, again, that's pretty significant stuff.
It's
I think that
word.
tells you
big word.
Yeah, it tells you right there that Michael Brewer this is going to be Baker Mayfield's team for the next couple of weeks, I think. For sure on Tuesday night against TCU, and then based on what Cliff said about the open week helping, that's not until the end of the month. So I think that's also an indication that he's expecting Baker Mayfield to be the guy on September 21st also. I think the bigger question, though, right now is if everybody is healthy, is this still Baker Mayfield's team? And I think he's reached a point right now where I think Baker Mayfield has played so well and is developing such a continuity with the offense that I don't think you can take him out right now. I think he will have to have a game where he struggles, maybe throws 3 picks, loses a fumble, something like that to happen before Cliff kind of reevaluates the quarterback situation and decides whether Michael Brewer could get to a point where he's the better choice. But right now, I don't think that's going to happen in the short term.
Yeah, right now, Baker Mayfield definitely the darling in the media's eyes, and I think in the fans as well, and he's done nothing to have that job taken away from him, Don. Here's the next subject matter, and this is good. The fans are keyed in on this because the media was sure keyed in on it today during the press conference. Kelly Utterback says, do you think Quentin White will get more playing time after his performance on Saturday night?
Quentin White on Saturday night carried 5 times for 71 yards. Now, I would point out a couple of things. He did not get any touches until Tech was 40 points ahead.
Right.
I think it was 41-7, something like that, 47-7 actually, before he went in and started carrying the football. So keep in mind, he's not only was he not going against the fired up, fresh SFA defense, this is all taking place in garbage time.
Right.
And then, the other thing, though, in Quentin White's defense, he had that 5-yard touchdown run where he is going to the right, sees a lane, cuts back behind the defensive end, makes the guy look bad, and then he makes a spin move, and he's into the end zone for a touchdown. Next series, he has that 38-yard run where he does a little stutter step and totally freezes the linebacker right in his tracks, and then he's on past him. This guy has a lot of potential, a lot of quickness, but he's still kind of raw, and he still does things that Mike Jinks, the running backs coach, isn't a big fan of. As much as the fans love it, Mike Jinks doesn't like that spin move.
No, he does not.
Because, when you do that, you open yourself up. Okay, you're not going to be having the ball tight in here, so you're opening yourself up to potentially fumbling, and then you're also potentially opening yourself up to, okay, you might make the first guy miss with a spin move, but then the second guy creams you.
Right.
And so, he told me this summer he'd like him not to do that. And then the other thing, everybody sees Quentin White on game night make some big plays, but Mike Jinks thinks back and remembers in the spring game, the offense is inside the 10-yard line, and Quentin White lost a fumble.
Right.
You can't afford for that to happen against TCU. So I think Quentin White is a guy that you're excited to have in your program, but they still want him to, work on ball security. They want him to work on pass protection and all those little things before you're going to see him get extended playing time in big situations.
And by no means did DeAndre Washington and Kenny Williams have a poor performance by any means against Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah, 237 yards the other night for Texas Tech's running game, which is a big improvement over that 48 yards that you had in the season opener against SMU.
Don, our next question is one that several defensive coordinators probably ask themselves every week when preparing for Texas Tech. Brian Grimes asks, how does TCU match up with Jace Amaro?
The unfortunate thing for TCU is they get the actual first full game from Jace Amaro since, last October?
West Virginia. Well, he technically got hurt.
He got hurt against West Virginia, didn't play a full game there. He was out for the rest of the season until the bowl game.
Right. And
had the punch against Minnesota, so he didn't finish that game, and then suspended for the first half of the opener and rested for the second half of the SFA game last week. So this should be, though, I think this will be one of the great games within the game matchups of Tech versus TCU, because Jace Amaro, as he showed Saturday night, big weapon for Texas Tech, 8 catches, 142 yards and a touchdown against Stephen F. Austin, versus TCU. You might say TCU's kind of safety's university. I mean, that's one of the things that they hang their hats on. And they have a terrific group with Sam Carter, Elisha Olabo, Chris Hackett. Those are 3 of the better players on that TCU defense. All of those guys are returning starters, and again, they really pride themselves on developing safeties and having good safety play. So, and I'm sure Gary Patterson and those guys will be doing a lot X's and O's wise to try to, if not take away Jace Amaro, at least limit his effectiveness and not let him kill you on Saturday night. But that should be a terrific matchup to watch.
Yeah, it's never fun when a giant guy plays inside receiver and goes meandering across the middle of the field, because as we've seen, when people have tried to pop him, they usually take the worst of it, and he rumbles for a few more yards. Don, staying on the subject of receivers, Rusted Armor has a good one here for you. Shakeem Grant should get blank carries every week.
We've seen Shakeem Grant, we've seen the Texas Tech coaches try to be creative in the ways that they're getting Shakeem the ball. Last Saturday night against Stephen F. Austin, he scores the touchdown early. He's lined up to the left, comes in motion behind Baker Mayfield, catches the pass in the flat, and then waggles his way up the right sideline for the touchdown. Each of the first 2 games, once against SMU, once against Stephen F. Austin, he's lined up in the backfield a couple of times and carried the football twice each game. He had an 18-yard run, remember, against SMU. He had a 10-yard run the other night against Stephen F. Austin. So to answer the question, Shakeem Grant should get, I'll say, 3 to 4 carries every week. He's shown that he's had a couple of nice runs early. Maybe you double that output a little bit and give him a couple more carries. But he's another guy, though, that because you have him returning kickoffs and because you use him in the slot, you don't want to wear him out too much. So, and
he's not the biggest kid in the world. You don't want him taking hits every second play on the offensive sets. All right, Don. Mark Mendoza, I believe that's his second appearance on the old Don versus Twitter. He says, what are the odds Devonte Fields sets out any quarters during the game on Thursday? Easy answer, right?
Yeah, Devonte Fields, of course, the TCU defensive end who was Big 12 Conference Defensive Player of the Year last year as a freshman. He will miss one quarter of Saturday's game. Now, I'm not sure if that's the first quarter or if they get to choose or what have you, but Stephan Stevenson, our friend down at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, the TCU beat writer, reported today, Monday, that Devonte Fields had sat out, that first game. He had to sit out 2 games.
Right.
So he sat out the first game against LSU, and he sat out 3 quarters on Saturday against Southeastern Louisiana. So he still has one more quarter to sit out to fulfill a 2-game suspension, and evidently that will happen on on Thursday night. So the Red Raiders will get to see 3 quarters of Devonte Fields, which I guess is better than seeing him for 4 quarters.
And we should specify that's an internally mandated suspension from Gary Patterson. So quite frankly, if things aren't going extremely well against Texas Tech, that could be applied at his discretion at another time. Let's just be honest about it. You're not going to hold a kid out and cost yourself a football game when you've already broken the 2-game suspension and brought him back.
Yeah, that's another terrific game within the game matchup. We were talking about Amaro versus the TCU safeties a moment ago, and Devonte Fields against the Texas Tech offensive tackles, whether that's LaRaven Clark on one side or Rashad Fortenberry on the other. Tech's ability to contain him and limit the number of times that he's breathing down Baker Mayfield's neck is going to be critical to the Red Raiders' ability to win the game on Thursday night.
Don, we have a couple of nice questions to finish up here, and this first one I'm absolutely in love with because you are extremely cantankerous on the topic of football uniforms for Texas Tech, and Alan Corbin asked you, what is your favorite Tech uniform combo from over the years?
You know, if they had a throwback game on some Texas Tech football Saturday, as they do at some places around the country, I would bring back the uniforms that Texas Tech wore in the early, mid 1960s. And for the fans of the Donnie Anderson era, it was black helmets, red double T, black Texas Tech, red jersey number on the sleeve, black belt, scarlet pants. And then one other nice touch that I liked on those helmets, on the back, the uniform numbers in big white numerals on the back of the helmet. Those were, to me, the classic Texas Tech look. And I wish there was some way that they could replicate those either this season or in the future, although I realize we're probably getting farther away from that than we are getting closer to that.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Don, your knowledge of Tech football past is both inspiring and frightening. You know that?
Well, I grew up around here since 1964. So
Pride of Tulia.
I soaked up a few things.
The pride of Tulia, Texas. All right, Don, last one here, good one too. Can you draw anything from a comparison of Leach, which would be Mike Leach, second year of offense at Tech and Washington State? Why can't they score? And that question coming from Brad Walker. That's a good one.
That's right. And Brad Walker, one of my old buddies from the journalism during my days on the campus paper at Texas Tech. For those who missed it late Saturday, Washington State and Mike Leach knocked off Southern Cal 10-7, and Mike Leach's team did it without scoring an offensive touchdown. Had a guy return an interception 70 yards. It was, I think, a 7-7 game, and then the kicker kicks the field goal. And Wazoo wins it 10-7. I would say, Washington State is kind of similar in development of the offense to what Texas Tech was back in 2001. And I told people when Mike was hired at Washington State, people who asked, and also when Sonny Dykes was hired at Arizona, I said, yeah, it's a fun offense to watch, but don't expect too much too soon.
Right.
To get from startup to peak efficiency takes time, and it can be an ugly process.
Right.
And from the experience of following that at Texas Tech, I would say it takes 3 years, because it was the 2002 season, I think, year 3, before you saw the Mike Leach offense really turn a corner and become that kind of devastating machine that it would be for much of the middle part of that decade and on up to 2008. Because back in 01, they scored 7 points against UT. They scored 12 points against A&M, 13 against the Sooners, 16 against Iowa.
Right.
So there's a lot of days, for guys who haven't done it before, who haven't played in the spread offense before, there's a lot of days where it's still going to look rough. I think it kind of reminds me of what I think of what Mike. I think this season could resemble what Leach went through here in 01, and I still think it'll be next year before you see Washington State's offense really kind of take off.
But irregardless, a huge win for Mike Leach in Washington State, and what could prove to be a very costly loss for Lane Kiffin and the Southern Cal Trojans, Don.
Yeah,
Maybe an understatement.
They were being really mean to Lane Kiffin. He probably wishes they had lost that game in Pullman instead of losing that game in the Coliseum in L.A. on Saturday night.
Absolutely. Don, another great group of questions here. Enjoyed this episode of Don versus Twitter. Remember, kick him your questions immediately after the game on Thursday. We'll get them on next week's segment. Until then, we've got a lot of coverage coming up of Texas Tech versus TCU on Thursday night from Jones AT&T Stadium. A couple products coming up at you tomorrow. We've got topics with Krista Pirtle and, of course, our UMC Health System AJ Media pregame show. But until that time, signing off, Don Williams, I'm Zach Long. We'll see you next time.